Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the Victorian Hour of IMARC Online 2020. My name's John Krbaleski. I'm the Head of Resources with the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. I'd like to begin this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I'm working from at the moment, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and those of other Aboriginal communities. Victorian Government's really proud to be a founding partner of IMARC. It came to Melbourne in 2014 and it's grown from strength to strength. It's a key pillar of the way that we support our resources sector, including our innovative mining equipment, technology and services companies that are providing their expertise around the globe. This hour is about showcasing the way the Victorian Government is supporting the growing responsible sector that's valued by community. And shortly you'll hear from the Geological Survey of Victoria, the state's geoscience agency. They'll be highlighting our world-class geoscientific data and knowledge that's readily available to you. It's online and it's free. You can't get better than that. And what an exciting time to be in our sector today. We're riding the crest of a really exciting wave that's one of the most exciting stories in the country, I think, at the moment. The rise of gold exploration and development in Victoria has just been incredible. And it's brought a welcome wave of new explorers and investors to the state. And it's great to see that wealth, those jobs and those opportunities in regional Victoria. The Geological Survey of Victoria estimates that there's still around 75 million ounces of gold to be discovered in northern Victoria, which is almost as much as we've mined to date, and that's pretty exciting. But it's not all about gold. There's a strong interest in Victoria on the back of emerging copper, base metals and mineral sands opportunities. And all this is wrapping up into some pretty incredible mineral exploration numbers. Mineral exploration spending in Victoria in 2018-19 was 6 times higher than it was back in 2015. That's just incredible stuff. And it shows no signs of slowing down, and nor do we want it to slow down. So as I said, that's great jobs, wealth opportunities for regional Victoria and more strength to the arm of industry that's working well with community to bring all of that to bear. That's very welcome by us. Now, during this hour, you'll also hear from Global Victoria, the state's export support agency. They're playing an important role helping our METS companies broaden their market reach and grow Victoria's reputation as a global mining hub. And that's an exciting story that I'm sure you'll be very interested in learning more about. So let's kick things off, for what I think will be a really informative session. I hope you enjoy it. I'll hand over to our first speaker, Paul McDonald, Director of the Geological Survey of Victoria. Welcome, Paul. Over to you.
Thanks, John. Hi, I'm Paul McDonald, the Director of the Geological Survey of Victoria. The Geological Survey of Victoria has been mapping and interpreting the surface and the subsurface of Victoria since it was established in 1852. And Victoria is a world-renowned gold province with a variety of deposit styles. The state has 13 goldfields that have each produced more than 1 million ounces of gold, with the Bendigo area producing more than 22 million ounces. Many of the Victorian goldfields offer opportunities for new discoveries through the application of modern geoscience knowledge and mineral exploration techniques and technologies. The Geological Survey Victoria manages and delivers world-class pre-competitive geoscience data and knowledge. Accessing this knowledge will improve your exploration targeting and reduce your exploration risk. The Geological Survey Victoria offers a huge amount of free geoscience data and knowledge. Accessing this vast knowledge base is your key to exploration success. We have more than 250,000 records available through our website. We have many modern geophysical data sets, which include some of the best coverage of airborne magnetics and ground gravity in Australia. And our drill core library contains more than 18,000 drill holes around minerals, energy, groundwater and infrastructure programs that will help you investigate our investment opportunities. The Geological Survey Victoria delivers a range of innovative geoscience products to suit all explorers. From a statewide crustal scale 3-dimensional geological model to detailed analysis of particular deposits. All of Victoria's geoscience data can be viewed and accessed through our online web mapping application called GeoVic. GeoVic is a free online mapping application that enables you to build your own earth resources related maps, perform searches and access data from a huge range of our data sources. You're welcome to contact us at any time to discuss the geology and mineral deposits of Victoria. Now let's hear from one of GSV's senior geoscientists, Ross Cayley. He's going to talk to you about Victoria's Heart of Gold.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the current state of play of gold in Victoria. Science is a collaborative process, so right up front I'd like to acknowledge all the fantastic collaborative partnerships we've had over the years with various other government, academic and industry agencies. This is my talk outline. Let's kick off. This is a table of significant drill intersections for 2017 worldwide. At the top of that list is Kirkland Lake Gold with Fosterville. Fosterville made the top of this list with a drill hole that intersected 15 metres at almost 1,500 grams per tonne gold, and it was in fact the best drill hole intersection for any metal in the world for 2017. As amazing as this drill hole intersection seems in a modern context, it's really just a reminder of the richness of the Victorian goldfields that made marvellous Melbourne so marvellous back in the late 19th century. They could build buildings like this just for a one-off exhibition in the 1880s. What does 15 metres at 1,500 grams per tonne look like as a rock? Well, it looks like this. It's quartz, literally studded with gold, up to 2% of the rock in some drill hole samples, like that core shown at the bottom of the photograph. This is where Fosterville is located. It's in the eastern Bendigo zone. It's located just a short distance east of Bendigo, which is also a world-class historic goldfield. Statistics for Fosterville: it's approaching a 10 million ounce field. You can see some production and reserve and guidance figures there. They're all very impressive. Victoria's got a world-class history, and we think that means it still has a world-class potential, only just starting to be recognised now. This is a geological map of Eastern Australia, very, very simplified. It's really depicting a belt of early Paleozoic rocks called the Tasman Fold Belt System, and they are the coloured rocks. The grey rocks are younger cover rocks sitting on top. So these rocks were formed by 3 to 4 cycles of convergent subduction accretion, where the ancient Pacific Ocean to the east was subducted beneath Gondwana, the continent to the west, adding on to the edge of the Gondwana supercontinent from the Cambrian, through the Ordovician, into the Silurian, and into the Permian to form much of present-day Australia. These orogenic systems, over more than 100 million years, created a lot of Eastern Australian crust that all looks very, very similar. Many of these rocks host early Paleozoic orogenic gold, but, and this is a big but, only the Bendigo zone in Victoria has the proven giant tier 1 orogenic gold deposits. There's something really special going on in Victoria that's different to other parts of Eastern Australia. Let's zoom in on the geology of Victoria. Total all-time gold mined globally through the whole of human history is about 200,000 tonnes. Now, of that large quantity of gold, Victoria has recorded gold production of more than 2,500 tonnes, possibly more than 3,000 tonnes. So that's 1.5% of world gold production from only 0.15% of the global land area. If you take Victoria's goldfields into account, that's just really 0.03% of the global land area. What does this mean? Well, it means that Victoria's goldfield geology has produced 2 orders of magnitude more gold than the global crustal average, at least. Let's zoom in on the geology of the main goldfields. Most of Victoria's recovered orogenic gold has come from the Bendigo zone, with significant but slightly lesser quantities coming out of the Stawell zone to the west and to the Melbourne zone to the east. These zones have got common age attributes that span across them. So the green goldfields are all considered to be Ordovician or Silurian in age. Further east, the Melbourne zone has got younger gold, later Silurian to Devonian in age, and that reflects the younger age of regional deformation of the rocks in the Melbourne zone. The zones of different age are separated by major fault zones, such as the Heathcote Fault Zone in central Victoria and the East Dipping Mawson Fault in western Victoria, that separates more ancient rocks of the Gondwana continent to the west from the goldfields terrains. Now, in addition to these goldfields, there are older goldfields as well. Some of them poke through in erosion windows, sticking up through the younger Melbourne zone cover on top in the eastern part of the Melbourne zone. And west of the Mawson Fault, there are gold and copper deposits in arc-related rocks that are related to a magmatic arc that developed along the eastern edge of Gondwana in the Cambrian. Let's zoom in on those Cambrian rocks first and have a look at what makes them tick. Volcanic arc-related base metals and gold. A lot of Eastern Australia is covered by younger rocks, so it's very hard to understand the older rocks. The key to success is geophysics, allows us to strip off some of that younger cover and see where rocks go under younger rocks and even under the sea. We can see the Staveley Arc in far western Victoria, a large belt of northwest trending magnetic rocks. So looking at a geology map, the Staveley Arc is sitting underneath younger yellow cover in western Victoria. And because it's all buried underneath these younger rocks, in order to understand it, we had to do some drilling. We also had to do some geophysics, including deep seismic reflection. So we shot some profiles over it to have a look at it. There's the raw data. It's hard to see at this scale, and the interpretation of it is shown below. Key elements of the seismic profile correlate with rocks mapped at the surface, which have an accretionary wedge appearance, with rocks mapped at the surface that consist of calc-alkaline, andesite and dacite, fitting interpretation as part of the Staveley Arc, and an area to the west, which is a hot metamorphic complex, which contains igneous rocks with arc and back arc geochemistry. So we consider the Staveley Arc, which sits inside the Grampian-Staveley zone, to be this Gondwana continent fringing magmatic arc system that was active in the Cambrian. Why is this important? Because arcs with this sort of configuration occur in places like the Andes in South America, and these modern arcs are world famous for their enormous world-class copper and gold deposits, and we see similar evidence for these sorts of systems in the Staveley Arc, and the current poster child for this is at Thursday's Gossan in the southern part of the arc. So Thursday's Gossan is still having a resource definition drill out. It's already looking like it's got potential for world-class size. You can see some of the intercepts there, 32 metres at 5.88% copper, including 2 metres at 40% copper. That's the blue bornite in that drill core. Keep your eye on this one. We can also trace rocks from Western Tasmania beneath Bass Strait and under central Victoria. And this allows us to correlate Dundas Trough, which contains Cambrian arc-like rocks, underneath Bass Strait and into the eastern part of the Melbourne zone, where it's sitting underneath the younger sedimentary rocks on top. This concept of having Proterozoic crust in Western Tasmania extending under central Victoria is called the Selwyn block model. Why is this significant? Well, the Mount Read volcanics in the Dundas Trough in Tasmania contain world-class mineralisation, copper and gold, Mount Lyell, Helier, Rosebery. There are exposures of the Selwyn block poking through the Melbourne zone. So this has added confidence to the interpretation given by the geophysics. And one of those exposures contains what is looking like very significant gold and base metal mineralisation. This is Karawan Resources' good intercepts struck at Hill 800 in the Jamison volcanics. You can see some of the numbers there, quite impressive. There's a selection of different intercepts from various drill holes as drill out of this prospect continues. The pattern that starts to emerge is the idea that we have Cambrian arc systems that are offset across a transform fault. We can run the deformation of this backwards and show where it sits prior to the Ordovician shifting of these continents back to a time in the Cambrian. And the stove of the arc lay directly along strike from Hill 800 and the Selwyn block, which in turn lay directly along strike from the Dundas Trough and the Mount Lyell, Rosebery and Helier deposits. So we think unrealised potential remains in Western and Central Victoria. Moving on to the Ordovician, the next time slice, intraplate orogenic gold in Victoria. A stable volcanic arc position was forming east of Gondwana throughout the Ordovician, and this is the Macquarie Arc. It's characterised by calc-alkaline volcanism with porphyry, copper and VMS deposits forming through that time. It's not a continuous arc. There are gaps in the Macquarie Arc, specifically in Victoria, and this is the precise time when orogenic gold was forming in the Bendigo zone, and we think these two factors might be related. Looking at the goldfields in Victoria, the goldfields are focused into the Bendigo zone and Stawell zone. The Bendigo zone was strongly deformed in the Ordovician when gold was introduced, and the Stawell zone experienced a second deformation at that time when its gold was also introduced, and these are the deposits shown in green. The most common host rock for Victoria's orogenic gold deposits is the most common rock, which is folded and faulted quartz-rich deep marine metasediments. These rocks are not inherently rich in gold, so the gold that's in them today seems to have come from some other source. The rocks that sit underneath the metasedimentary pile are also important, and given that they're oceanic rocks, it's not surprising that the rocks sitting underneath are older, mid-ocean ridge and back arc basin ocean basalts. And these rocks are exposed where they've been brought to the surface in the hanging wall of major fault zones. Is unlike the metasediments that sit on top of them, these are a credible source for lots of gold as a source rock. So on the same scale of 1 to 100, they sit more like 10 to 100. So they're much better than the metasediments as a source for gold. The Cambrian metavolcanics are also a significant host for gold. So the poster child for that sort of deposit is at Stawell in the western part of the Stawell zone. At Stawell, there's large fault-bounded blocks of kilometre scale of metabasalt embedded in metasedimentary rocks which are much weaker. And it's the difference in strength of these two rocks that has focused faulting and dilation along the margins, the interfaces between these two rock types. That's where the main mineral systems has formed. Now, these shapes and patterns in the rocks are a legacy of subduction accretion in an earlier time. It's just these faults have been reactivated. Because of the scale of the subduction accretion system, it's no surprise that other similar mineralisation systems occur along strike in addition to Stawell. For example, the Irvine Gold Project that Navarre is working on south of Stawell, and we think there's potential to find many more of these sorts of deposits north and south along strike adjacent to the Stokely Arc. Moving on to the Silurian. The Siluro-Devonian is a very dynamic time in Eastern Australia, a redistribution of earlier deposits and the introduction of new ones. The Silurian is a period where the Macquarie Arc, which had been stable throughout the Ordovician, started to become unstable, and the subduction trench migrated in position much further east. With the Macquarie Arc becoming unstable, the arc began to break up, bits of it became extinct, and bits of it became translated. And trying to understand the complex geology that occurred throughout this period is one of the things that has led to a thing called the Lachlan-Orocline hypothesis. And it's significant to understand because the introduction of world-class porphyry copper gold, like for example at Cayley and VMS and strategic metals, occurred during the Silurian. Here is a tilt filter image of aeromagnetic data for southeastern Australia, including all the areas in New South Wales under younger cover. One of the beauties of Victorian geology is that the rocks are well exposed in the Great Dividing Range, and we can take that understanding and use it to extend geology from the known areas in Victoria into the less well-known areas undercover in New South Wales. And we can take the rock types and ages and fault movement histories that we see in Victoria and extend them in underneath the younger rocks to fill in a basic geology map. And you can see from that map that there's some very curved and complex geology in there. And the Macquarie Arc are the orange rocks. So you can see it's a very complex, fragmented looking belt. It's been difficult to understand these shapes and how that came to be the way it is. And this lack of understanding has hampered exploration, particularly undercover. We can see all these patterns in Eastern Australia. We have large strike slip subvertical faults that look like they're deeply tapping. These faults are exposed in Victoria. We know the age of them. They're Silurian, the same age as large rift basins opening up like the Darling Basin, for example. And perhaps most significantly, we have large curved folds superimposed over some of the older trends, and these folds appear to be also Silurian in age. So with these constraints, it's possible to take the current configuration of the major elements of geology in southeastern Australia, apply the mapping geology and the geophysics and the numerical modelling, and unpack that geology through time to arrive at a system as it looked at the time when the Macquarie Arc was active and the Victorian goldfields were forming. So when we do that, we can see several features. One is in New South Wales and Queensland, where the system looks like a classic continent dipping subduction zone, not that different to the Staveley Arc, just younger. And meanwhile, in Victoria, there is no subduction. And this, we think, is very important. The Bendigo zone was a trap plate segment. Ocean crust was not being subducted. Instead, it was being thickened. And we think this is possibly critical for world-class orogenic gold endowment. And the reason we think it's critical is because we think the ocean crust is the rock source for the gold. This is the critical missing element that's missing elsewhere in the system, because elsewhere in the system, most of the ocean crust was getting subducted. This explains why Victoria has the large endowment of orogenic gold. What are the implications? Well, because this system got folded in the Silurian, pre-existing gold deposits, like for example, Ordovician ones, the Stawell zone and the Bendigo zone, may well have been wrapped around into new positions, and they haven't really been discovered yet. And so we think there's potential for Bendigo zone gold in the Northern Tabaraba zone, for example. And because of these new ideas, an active investment community is starting to find some success, including undercover at places like Four Eagles and Tandara. New opportunities exist to explore the Northern Tabaraba zone, which is really poorly exposed for extensions to Bendigo style gold. And because of the oroclinal folding, which has pulled bits of the Macquarie Arc south into Victoria, there's opportunity to see Macquarie Arc related mineral systems in eastern Victoria, and we are starting to find some success looking for those. This has led to an increase in healthy exploration activity in Victoria. There's increasing mineral exploration, increases the chance of success. You can't find something if you don't look for it. And it seems that those efforts are being rewarded because the listed junior companies in Victoria are going up in value at a higher rate than the Australian ASX Gold Explorer average. So in conclusions, we think that the new understanding in data and technology and concepts have given confidence for a new dawn for Victorian gold exploration. One virtually blind world-class discovery at Fosterville has revolutionised the game and also added about 10 million ounces to Victoria's gold inventory. How many other Fostervilles can there be? We think there can be several. The Staveley Arc is a new opportunity for primary and epigenetic base metals and gold in a huge swath of Western Victoria, and it's mostly undercover and untested. The Hill 800 is the same in the Selwyn block in Central Victoria. We've got some great new geodynamic and tectonic concepts that we think do a better job of explaining the distribution and origin of all Victoria's various mineral systems. And of course, there's other systems as well. I'm not going to talk about them today. But what's important with these new models is they give a predictive capacity for looking for gold systems, including undercover. And Rob Duncan, Senior Economic Geologist at the Geological Survey, is going to talk about that more in the next talk. We've crossed a threshold of data and understanding to what looks like sustained success. Thank you.
Good afternoon all, and thank you very much, Ross, for the introduction. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes developing a greater appreciation for why the Victorian goldfields, in particular the Bendigo zone, is so well endowed with gold. Research and development by industry, academia and government agencies, which include the Geological Survey of Victoria and Geoscience Australia, has shaped a comprehensive understanding of controls on gold mineralisation in Victoria that is globally unique. This is truly significant because the geoscience framework allows industry to be more predictive, and this in turn helps facilitate mineral discovery. And this is particularly relevant when we consider that Victoria is blessed with some of the most gold-enriched rocks on Earth. In fact, nearly 2% of global historical gold production to date has been sourced from Victoria's rocks. We need a series of geological events to current processes and conditions to coincide in space and time in order to potentially form an economic concentration of metals at a specific location or an ore deposit. The key 5 ingredients that contribute to Victoria's gold endowment are 3 tectonic large-scale events which generated large volumes of hydrothermal fluid that was capable of mobilizing and transporting gold, a crustal scale fault network that allowed the migration of these gold-bearing fluids, 2 volumetrically important rock reservoirs that were already enriched in gold, and multiple physiochemical mechanisms that drive gold deposition at structural and chemical traps, and also relative geological stability for the last 400 million years, which leads to pretty good preservation of the deposits near the surface. Of note, before we move on, is the coherent understanding that has been developed for mineral systems is vital to foster mineral exploration success. Our understanding of the Victorian orogenic gold system is key to unlocking mineral exploration success in prospective areas that are hidden, particularly under younger cover sequences. So the talk after this one by GSV resident senior geophysicist Phil Skladzien will examine how better to unlock predictive capacity through the interrogation of large-scale geophysical data sets. The acquisition of those has been largely funded by the Victorian and Australian governments. There's been talk about the metrics that demonstrate the value proposition in finding new gold deposits in Victoria. However, let's look at it from a different perspective. If you've been listening to any of the resource discovery presentations for about the last 15 years, there's a common message in there that mineral resource companies are finding it harder to discover T1 assets and are also having to deal with declining resource grades. So here's a plot of year versus the gold grade milled for Australia wide in this brown colour and Victoria in this orange colour. If we focus in on the last 30 years, the gold grade milled in Australia has almost consistently decreased, whereas Victoria, we're seeing a rather significant increase. For example, so the average over the past 20 years, Australia-wide would be 1.8 grams per tonne, whereas in Victoria it's 4.2 grams per tonne, so that's a pretty significant difference. And in fact, if we just look at 2018, so the most recent year for which data has been compiled, the average gold grade in Victoria was a order of magnitude greater. So in Victoria, it was 11 grams per tonne. Australia-wide, it was 1.5 grams per tonne. This is related to the extraction of material that's really high grade in portions of the Fosterville deposit, but also increasing gold grades that we're seeing as a trend in some other deposits such as Costerfield. Of particular note, the Fosterville deposit had the lowest all-in sustaining cost of any gold mine in the world, so for 2019. So the 5 key ingredients that contributed to gold, the gold mineral systems in central Victoria, help us understand why these deposits are such high grade. And in turn, that makes them a really attractive mineral exploration target. Geologically speaking, Victoria is divided into several north-south zones on the basis of the occurrence of similar rocks of similar age. The central portion of the state is termed the Stawell, Bendigo and Melbourne zones. And collectively, these account for close to 80 million ounces of historical production. The significant historical production centres are marked here in yellow, and the size of those dots is relative to the amount of gold produced. And that's the vast majority of Victoria's historical gold production. The geology is characterised by a series of Cambrian age volcanic rocks and also a package of Cambrian to Devonian metasedimentary rocks that are up to 10 kilometres thick where they've been preserved intact. And essentially they become younger from west to east. The zones themselves are separated by large crustal scale faults that trend north-south, for example, the Moyston, Avoca, Mount Wellington and Governor faults. And the entire sequence has been intruded in the Devonian by a series of granites shown here in this stippled marking. We won't dwell on this slide because Ross has already done a fantastic job of covering this. But again, there's three major tectonic events related to back arc inversion associated with changes in far field subduction arrangements to the east of present-day Victoria. These events were the Benambaran mountain building episode or orogeny that occurred 445 million years ago, the Bindian orogeny at 415 million years ago, and the Tabarabaran orogeny at 390 million years ago. So cumulatively, these events generated 70% crustal shortening between what's the edge of the Australian continent, or the Delamerian origin, 500 million years ago, and a trapped microcontinental fragment, the Selwyn block, to the east. And we see the majority of the gold production has come from the Bendigo zone. This structural arrangement that occurs between the Delamerian origin and the Selwyn origin is Selwyn block, is pretty unique. And we see these large scale faults here in red. And these are the plumbing system for gold bearing fluid, which is transported on a massive crustal scale. And it was this system that was open during periods of fluid overpressure generated by these three orogenic events. And we've learned a lot about the large scale structural architecture of the crust through large scale state and federally funded data acquisition, particularly seismic, gravity and magnetic surveys. And it's these along with in-field empirical geological observations that have allowed us to understand how the rocks have been deformed during these mountain building events. In the Bendigo zone itself, on a camp scale, we clearly see there's a set of predictable geological reasons why gold deposits are typically located at some distance from the major crustal scale fault zones in rocks. These rocks are characterised by relatively low strain, typically exhibit a single phase of deformation, and as such, folds are typically preserved as upright and with sub-horizontal fold axes, such as those that we see here. When we zoom in on the deposit scale, we see a remarkable geometric consistency of the structure of the rock packages that host the major deposits. Typically, gold is associated with antiformal closures, and where those antiformal closures are cut by moderately dipping thrust faults. It's in these intersections where rapid physiochemical changes happen in the fluid, and this means that gold precipitates very efficiently in these sites, generating the high gold grades that Victoria is renowned for. During these mountain building events, the rocks get subjected to higher pressures and temperatures as they get buried. What's significant in this plot of temperature versus pressure is when we reach around 550 degrees C, and that's what we call the transition between green schist and amphibolite metamorphic conditions, minerals re-equilibrate to these hotter and higher pressure conditions. One mineral that's recrystallized during this at this temperature is chlorite to hornblende, and it loses a lot of water during that. And this reaction can happen in either sedimentary or volcanic rocks. And as such, that generates really large volumes of hydrothermal fluid. It's relatively low salinity fluid. So whilst it can quite clearly transport gold and other elements such as antimony that we see in some deposits in Victoria, it can't transport other metals such as copper, lead or zinc. And that's why we see precious metal only, gold rich mineralisation in the Victorian orogenic systems. Gold is mostly transported as sulfide and bisulfide complexes, and that's also generated at around 550 degrees C from the conversion of pyrite to pyrrhotite. But where does the gold come from? In terms of a metal source using global averages for similar rocks in similar tectonic settings, we see that basalts have around 5 ppm, sandstones slightly elevated, ppb, sandstones 7.5 ppb, and shale greater than 9 ppb. So all these are pretty good plausible sources and pretty voluminous in the Victorian geology. So it's really good that we've got two plausible sources for the extreme gold enrichment that we see in the Bendigo zone. A particular note is the special intermediate magnesium-rich volcanic rocks that occur in central Victoria named bonanites. Those are the result of refractory melts in the mantle. So they're essentially very enriched in gold, and that might have been a specific gold-rich reservoir for the Victorian systems. As we touched on previously, the rapid physiochemical changes in those key structural zones drive efficient deposition of gold from the transporting hydrothermal fluid. We see in this diagram of oxygen fugacity versus pH that gold and gold solubility contours on top, we see that gold is most effectively transported under just below the sulfate buffer and at near neutral pHs, where both bisulfide and sulfide complexes are stable. The quickest way to precipitate the gold is to destabilize those complexes through increasing oxygen fugacity. But then we also have a range of processes that operate in the gold deposits in Victoria, and we see that in the rocks, that actually explain the gold enrichment. So we can also decrease the oxygen fugacity through wall rock reductant, through interaction of the fluid and, for example, a black shale. Or we might have a smaller scale chemisorption of complexes onto pre-existing minerals such as arsenopyrite that also decrease FO2 and precipitate gold. We can see deviation from near neutral pHs, and we can see that through fluid rock interaction as well, but also through fluid phase separation. And we can have simple decreases in activity of the sulfide and bisulfide complexes through deposition of other sulfides such as pyrite. And more importantly, we can actually see these proxies for these processes in the rocks and map them out, and then we can use those to be predictive and identify high priority gold exploration areas. Just to quickly touch on preservation in gold systems in Victoria, because we're running close to time, the three events responsible for gold mobility also drive progressive enroofing of the Bendigo zone rocks. And this means that the orogenic gold systems have been brought very close to the surface. Since 400 MA, Victoria's essentially been pretty geologically stable, except for between 85 million years ago and 5 million years ago, where gold systems were partially exposed and eroded to form the alluvial gold systems. And it was the discovery of those alluvial systems that generated the original gold rush back in the 1850s. In the bedrock environment, we can also see that the dispersion of these systems have a large footprint, which also assists with exploration. And those are on the scale of 10 to 25 kilometres, much bigger than the actual footprint of the mineralisation itself. And that coincides with known structural trends. So just to summarise, here's the 5 key ingredients that explain Victoria's massive gold endowment: those orogenic events, the multiple fluid, the multiple metal sources, the pathway architecture, and the numerous precipitation mechanisms along with that preservation near surface. And as an endpoint, I'd really just like to highlight the work that was completed by the Geological Survey of Victoria as part of the Gold Undercover initiative. So Lecitin et al. Used the distribution and gold endowment of known deposits in exposed Victorian gold fields and applied a statistical simulation to work out the potential gold endowment that remains to be discovered under younger cover rocks of the Murray Basin. We see in this summary table that those simulations predict across these 3 zones that there's 66 million ounces yet to be discovered gold in a number of significant gold fields. And this really helps to explain the current gold exploration success in the northern Bendigo zone, and also highlights why it's such an exciting time to be involved in gold exploration in Victoria. If you've got any questions about the presentation, please don't hesitate to contact me, or you'll be able to find a veritable goldmine of maps, reports, interpretations and data made available by the Geological Survey on our website. So now we're going to hear from GSV's Senior Geophysicist, Phil Skladzien, who will take us through how to maximise the incredible value that is available from pre-competitive government-funded geophysical data sets and how that assists in helping us to find some of those undiscovered answers. Thank you so much for your time, and stay safe.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about some geophysical data sets that we have available from the GSV and how we apply those data sets to our interpretation and our work programs. Just a brief talk outline, starting off with regional pre-competitive data sets. So we're really lucky here in Victoria. We've got great coverage of a number of different data sets, including geological mapping. So the mapping history goes back over 150 years in Victoria. And all of those component map products and map sheets have been combined into a seamless geology package over recent times. So as you might be aware, Victoria has got quite a bit of cover. So all of this yellow in the north and paler yellow and green colours in the south are younger cover. Within those, there's a window of exposed basement throughout central Victoria. So they're the blues and purple rocks that you see there. And not surprisingly, historical gold production and exploration and occurrences occur within that Paleozoic bedrock. So restricting exploration to the north is the Murray Basin cover. The Golden Triangle that you may be familiar with is where most of the gold that's come out of Victoria has come from, between those towns and mines that you see there. So one way that we can increase this search space is to look north undercover, where these structures that control mineralisation are trending and extending undercover to the north. So this is a product we have available. It's a Murray Basin depth to basement surface. We also have surfaces for formations within the Murray Basin, but this gives us a great idea of the exploration search space and what kind of depths we're thinking about when looking through the cover. As well as mapping, Victoria has got great regional potential field coverage, so geophysical coverage. This is the magnetics, airborne magnetics. So we've got a statewide grid, 50 by 50 metre grid, that is really useful for regional exploration work. So the surveys that have got into that range from 50 metre flight lines all the way up to 400, and all that data is available freely from GADS. And there's also radiometric data sets that are available, and a statewide database as well for the radiometrics. As well as the magnetics, we also have great gravity coverage, regional ground gravity, a nominal station spacing of about 1.5 kilometres throughout Victoria, and selected detailed areas where there's been more detailed surveys carried out. So again, all that data is available, the grids are available as well. As well as potential field data, we're lucky enough to have a full crustal seismic reflection transect across the whole state, so east to west. That was acquired in 3 tranches in collaboration with Geoscience Australia, and a really great data set that we can use for interpreting the geology with depth, so giving us control in 3D to really understand the big picture crustal architecture of Victoria. So just having a closer look at the seismic, this is the northern central region in Victoria that we're looking at. So this is a magnetic TMI image. You can see the seismic lines through there in the black, and gold occurrences. So just looking at these 2 lines here, you can see the section. We've got the Bendigo zone in the east, and then the Stall zone in the west there. Again, really useful and powerful to be able to visualize the crust, the full crust. So this data set goes all the way down to about 60 kilometers, 20 seconds. And just to refresh ourselves again, the orogenic gold model that we have here in Victoria, the mineral system, we've got the source at depth in the lower to mid-crustal levels, more volcanics, and hydrothermal fluids are using these deep crustal faults as fluid conjugates to bring up hydrothermal fluid and then deposit the gold out of those fluids near the surface. So zooming in to the eastern section of the lines there, we can see these volcanics, the deep volcanics being thrust up along some of these faults. This is the Mount William fault, and we also see deformation and thrusting of these volcanics with some of the other deeper regional faults. We've got that control in the seismic and in the mapping, but how can we extend away from those areas of control and interpret these structures? Well, geophysics works. So here we're looking at gravity data on the surface and a cross-section with the seismic. So we can see these faults that we see in the seismic have a response in the gravity that we can map and we can trace out and interpret as well. Really powerful combining these sorts of data sets together to help our understanding. So just having another look at the Murray Basin in this area here where it's a little bit shallower compared to the northwest there. Again, we've got the mapping, we've got mapped faults and gold occurrences and deposits pretty much terminating at that boundary of the Murray Basin. So how can we look under that cover and extend that interpretation, that geological knowledge and mineral deposit, identifying mineral deposits further north? Potential field geophysics is a really useful tool for doing that, especially at the regional scale. So we can trace some of these anomalies up further north undercover and infer the geology by proxy by using the geophysics. So that was the gravity. This is the same area with the magnetics. And again, we can trace some of these anomalies north, but there are areas where it's quite bland and difficult to do that with the standard TMI or with the Bugaj gravity. So is there anything we can do to enhance those data sets and really bring out the value in them and all that subtle detail that they contain? And the answer is yes, we can. One of the methods we can do that is by applying mathematical filtering to the data set. So here's an example of a bunch of gravity filters that we've applied. So you can see the different type of information that's coming out. We're getting broader anomalies here from deeper sources with the bandpass filters, then the tilt and the high pass are really giving us definition of the shallower high frequency anomalies. We can do the same with the magnetics as well. You can see a whole bunch of different filters there, bringing out different responses and signatures out of that data that we can utilize. And we can combine some of these things together, some of these filters together and data sets together. In this case, we've got gravity draped over the magnetic surface, and we can use those to correlate anomalies with each other from different data sets and build up our interpretations. We can also do similar things with the same data set that's been filtered differently. In this case, magnetics with a tilt filter and a bandpass filter, bringing out different responses in that data set. So just running through a couple of examples of how we've used these data sets and these processing techniques and modeling to help us with our interpretation and our regional sort of mineral system development. And again, looking at the north central Victoria area, the northern Bendigo zone here in detail. So on the left, we have the map geology. On the right, we've got a filtered gravity image with the Murray Basin to the north. Stripping away that Murray Basin cover, you can see how we can correlate these faults and these structures from the known in the south up underneath cover to the unknown, and plotting the major mineral occurrences and mines and prospects. You can see there really is that association with the faults that we see, tapping those deeper levels of the crust and bringing up the fluids that then mineralize in these locations. And I'll just draw your attention to this Four Eagles Tandara prospect, which is quite a way up north undercover. These prospects were discovered with the aid of regional gravity data. So in 2007, we undertook an infill gravity survey in this region, and that really brought out some of the subtler responses in the signature, and we're able to update our interpretations of the faults and the structures, which then led to some changes in the exploration program that led to the discovery of these prospects. So a really good outcome and a great example of how we can use regional data sets to help in that initial exploration phase. And another example from the same area. So not only is gravity useful, it is particularly useful in northern Bendigo undercover, because we actually do pick up the response of these faults. They don't really show up as much in the magnetics in this region, but we can use the magnetics to help us with the understanding of the overall picture and the bigger geological context. So this is a zoomed in area of the northern Bendigo zone showing the Heathcote volcanics. So this is a fault slice of the volcanics that are being brought up along the Mount William Fault, and we can map them in the south, and then they extend undercover under the Murray Basin. But if we look at the magnetics, we can trace these highly magnetic volcanic units to the north. And what the magnetic shows us, and to a similar degree in the gravity, is that there's this deformation in the volcanics, the Rochester antiformal stack. And using the magnetics, we can model what's happening with the volcanic units. So these black lines that you see there are profiles that I've used to model the magnetic response. And this is what you're looking at here. So we have these profiles across these sections, and they show us the dip of the volcanic bodies. So these are tabular bodies representing the volcanic units. You can see they fit quite nicely with the profiles. And what this shows us is that there's actually some deformation in the dip of the volcanic units. So in the south here, where it's been mapped, it's west dipping, which is what the modelling shows us. But as we move further north, around the vicinity of the antiformal stack, we actually get overturned beds dipping to the east in parts of this region. So just having a look at that in 3D, there's the bodies there that you can see, and zooming in, we can see the seismic section there. You'll notice that the magnetic bodies that were modelled match really well with what we've imaged as far as geometries of the seismic of the Heathcote volcanics. And what we think is happening here is that at about 420 MA, this area was undergoing north-south compression. So that caused these features that we can see in the volcanics, in the magnetic response of the volcanics. In the south, the Tubrac megakink, which is a bit of a dogleg in the volcanics trend there. And in the north, we've got the antiformal stack. Locally overturned beds that have been buckled from the north-south and squashed and deformed. And in the south there, where the Tubrac megakink is positioned, we can map a fault coming off the volcanics, a south dipping thrust fault, and we would infer that a similar structure would have developed in the north there, where the antiformal stack sits as well, to enable that deformation that we see in the volcanics to be expressed in the turbidite pile as these thrust faults, so transpressional structures. And if we plot the location of Fosterville Gold Mine and the Lockington Prospect on there, it's actually quite interesting that this trend that we see in these northwest compressional structures actually lines up quite well with the position of those that mine and deposits. So if we keep looking at the video here, you can see those overturned beds and the bowing of the volcanics. This is the gravity on top and our 2011 Bendigo fault model. So again, you can see how well those bodies that we've modelled line up with the seismic. So again, we can infer these structures from the magnetics or map them where they're outcropping and where they're expressed in the magnetics. But can we see them in any other data sets? The answer is yes. So if you get your eye in, you can actually pick them in the gravity, the filtered gravity in this case. Again, showing where they line up in relation to some of these mines and deposits. And if we look at the data, we can actually pick quite a number of these structures. And again, the correlation with some of the prospects and major mineral occurrences is quite marked, and something that we're quite interested in. And why is that? Well, what we've observed of major deposits that are associated with these north, south, west dipping crustal structures is that they seem to be clustered along those faults. They don't, the mineralization isn't consistent along the faults. Now, why is that? Perhaps it's something to do with these northwest structures that have deformed and interacted with the earlier faults. So if that's the case, and perhaps there's dilation along these zones of interaction between the faults, that has enabled fluids to come up those regions more readily and been focused up those regions and then brought up to the higher levels in the crust, and given us this type of distribution that we're seeing of the gold occurrences and major deposits. So just the last slide here, some of the other 3D models that we've been involved with building at the survey, and these models provide a regional mineral systems framework for explorers to come and utilise. They can embed their more detailed models into these regional models to give them some context and a geological framework and understanding for their specific exploration programs. So just in summary, there's some points there, I'll let you read those yourselves, and that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks to our senior geoscience staff from the Geological Survey of Victoria for presenting this afternoon. We're going to shift gears now, move away from mineral prospectivity to hear from George de Scala, Deputy Director of International Market Development with Global Victoria. Now, I'm sure, as many of you know, our resources sector in Victoria extends beyond just mining. It includes knowledge and skills that are just so important to underpinning the global mining sector. There are innovative companies here in Victoria that are found in professional services, they're found in education, health and advanced manufacturing. And it's Global Victoria with its amazing infrastructure that's helping these companies put their best foot forward as they look to major international markets around the world. Thanks, George. Over to you.
Thank you, John. Hello to everyone and welcome. My name is George de Scala, and I'm going to provide a short overview of Global Victoria and what we do for exporters. Like John, I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders joining us. Global Victoria is the Victorian Government's trade facilitation agency, set up to support exporters to grow and strengthen their international engagement. We do this through a number of ways. We build the skills of Victorian exporters. We connect exporters with global networks and opportunities. We assist international buyers source products and services from Victoria. We provide market intelligence and industry insights. We promote Victoria's world-class industry capabilities. We attract global talent to the state, and we also advocate for the best trade policy for Victorian exporters. Now, we do this utilising our extensive network of 23 offices around the world. And on display here is the location of those 23 offices. It's from these offices that Global Victoria has dedicated trained staff to support companies to develop and execute their export strategies. Out of these offices, they also deliver outbound trade missions with a specific sector focus. and METS industry is one of those priority sectors. And this is particularly so in markets such as Latin America, Middle East, and India. If you want to learn more about how you can engage with Global Victoria activities, go to the website global.vic.gov.au. From this website, you'll be able to get more information on programs offered by Global Victoria. Just a quick snapshot of some of these programs. Global. It's a diagnostic tool that enables companies to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are in terms of their export strategies and identifying relevant information to support you in developing your export strategy. Global Intellect Program. This program matches up exporters with international students that are currently in Victoria and puts together a research project identifying key components of what exporters are looking for. It's a free service available for exporters and it's due to recommence in 2021. Global Victoria has also an export skills program, which is set up to better prepare Victorian exporters to engage in international markets. And there's also online training and seminars, as well as local and international workshops and briefings on specialist and topical themes essential for international trading success. Global Victoria also has programs for women in international business and also for e-commerce related companies. So if you want further information, please go to the website. In addition to these activities, the Victorian Government has announced $15.7 million in an export recovery package. This is especially set up in response to COVID-19 and its impact on exports. The program will include virtual trade mission program and e-commerce related activities, and also supporting companies to facilitate freight support. More information will be made available soon, but you can register your interest in finding out more about this program by going to the Global Victoria website. Global Victoria has dedicated support programs specific for METS companies. As John mentioned, the Victorian Government is a founding partner of IMARC, and Global Victoria supports METS companies to exhibit at the Victorian Pavilion and undertake extensive business matching program for international visitors participating in the program. We also have our overseas offices conducting briefings as part of IMARC. On top of that, Victorian Government or Global Victoria also supports outbound trade missions. Although they might be virtual for 2021, we are looking at participating in Expo Min and Expo Nor in Chile, Peru Min in Antofagasta, Mining World Russia, and PDAC in Toronto. We also have regionally based initiatives such as the LATAM METS Virtual Business Accelerator Program. This is where we identify particular needs in overseas mining sites and trying to identify capabilities here in Victoria of METS companies that can provide services to address these particular needs. There's also bespoke assistance to companies via our international office network, from partner identification through to market entry plans. And as mentioned previously, in response to COVID, we're developing a virtual trade mission program to reflect the ability for companies to participate in international events. Another initiative which the Victorian Government is supporting METS companies is the Victoria's METS Export Hub. I'm really pleased to let you know that about this new program, the Victorian METS Export Hub, which has been run by Osmine. The hub will operate from 5 centres through Victoria and will create a network of export-focused companies in order to build capability and understanding and accelerate the growth of export opportunities. The hub provides a number of services linking new exporters to those who have been there and done that, provide export tools and guidance, provide tailored capability and training, and ultimately work with international customers to bring them a package of integrated solutions. The Victorian METS Export Hub is funded under the Federal Government's Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources under the Small and Medium Enterprises Export Hubs initiative. It's also been established in partnership with the Victorian Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions, which is contributing funding. It's a free service, so go to the website shown here on the website to register your interest, or reach out to Gordon, who is heading up the hub, for more information. In conclusion, I wish you all the best for your participation in IMARC 2020, whether it be virtual or through in-market activities. There's more information on the Global Victoria website. There's a contact number here for you to contact for more information, and best of luck. We look forward to working with you. Thank you. Over to you, John.
Thanks, George, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon for the Victorian Government Hour of IMARC Online. As you've heard, it's a pretty exciting time here in Victoria for our sector, and what you've learnt this afternoon hopefully is a bit more about what the Victorian Government's doing to support pre-competitive geoscience, but also companies to export their terrific services to the rest of the world. I encourage you to visit our online virtual booth to learn more about the terrific information that we have to support investment in our sector today, to speak to our knowledgeable staff about what we're doing to grow our sector moving forward, but also to learn a bit more about those amazing companies that I mentioned that are doing great work both here in Victoria, around the country, and exporting their knowledge and services to the rest of the world. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. I hope you have a great conference.